As we discuss Habakkuk 2, let's remind ourselves that Habakkuk lives in Jerusalem and is a contemporary with Lehi and Jeremiah. So all these men may have known each other. I find that really compelling to think about them all getting together for possibly a family evening and share war stories of what their experience has been like during the week being out in the streets of Jerusalem, trying to convince the people to return to covenantal faithfulness with God. So a couple of key themes that we're going to be looking for in Habakkuk is that we can find hope in God and we should trust God. Now, consider the historical circumstances. The people in Jerusalem are being impacted by the Egyptians and primarily the Babylonians. There's this like grand political military fight going on for control of the Middle East, primarily centered in Israel. And Israel finds itself, Jerusalem specifically, do we turn to the Egyptians for support? Do we turn to the Babylonians for support? And many of the prophets are saying, listen, it is true you may have to make political alliances, but most importantly, your most important political alliance should be to God. And that covenant that he gave you at Mount Sinai, you guys have not been faithful to it. You cannot prosper peacefully in the land if you're not faithful to God. So it's kind of what Habakkuk has been teaching. Jeremiah teaches the same thing. Lehi teaches the same thing. They might just use different words. But there's also hope that God himself, because he is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that his promises are sure forever, even though individuals might choose to walk away from those eternal promises and blessings. That choice does not actually destroy God's offering of the freely given blessings to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants. Meaning, nobody can destroy God's covenant to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants. There's nothing that any one of us can do, which means there's always hope. But we have to choose. We have to be faithful. Let's look at a couple of verses here. And you might look for, even if there's a pattern of indictment, judgment, instruction, and aftermath like we saw in Micah. Let's start in verse 5. Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desires hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth upon him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that laddeth himself with thick clay. Shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them? Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for violence of the land, and of the city, and all that dwell therein. So there's a couple ways we can interpret this. One could be God speaking out against people who are so covetous that they take what's not theirs and they use those resources now to oppress others and to cause injustice. We also could look at this as a prophecy from Habakkuk against foreign leaders who are punishing Israel for their faithlessness to God, but themselves are not particularly faithful people, that God's going to allow the Babylonians to be conquered as well. Let's continue verse 9. Woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. Thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people, and hast sinned against thy soul. For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establish a city by iniquity. So God is saying, you cannot build a civilization, a society, a community, a family on unrighteousness, on blood, on violence, on anger, on hate, on stealing, on adultery, on anything that God told the Israelites in the covenant at Mount Sinai not to do. And God is also saying, even foreign countries that do these things and then come and invade Israel, yeah, they might take over Israel because the people have been unfaithful, but even these foreign countries also will eventually reap the consequences of their own poor choices. This might all sound really sad and foreboding, but let's actually jump ahead. We might remember God's covenantal love is always enduring. So there's always hope. And we see this in Habakkuk. Verse 20, the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So given all this death and destruction that Habakkuk is prophesying, and we know that does happen, even Lehi was prophesying something similar, yet God is still in his temple, and we can go approach him and be embraced by him. That is the promise we have in verse 20. So wherever you're at in your life, if it's been challenging situation you've been in, you've had personal death and destruction, God is still in his temple, and you can still approach him and still be embraced by him. There is hope for wherever you're at. God's love endures forever, and there's nothing in the world that can destroy God's enduring love. It's like the sunlight. It is always there. We simply just have to open the curtains and let it in.